And I would like to say I don't support pornography in any way. I don't look at it myself. I don't even own a pornograph, just for the record, so I don't want you to think I'm a pervert. You know, I know it's easy to romanticize other cultures, especially ones that are as radically different from ours as the Indians in the jungle. But you know, maybe it's just a kind of a cultural midlife crisis in a way that we're living through in the West, because we look at our own lives and we think that they're completely alienating and unfulfilling based on greed and an architecture of lies. And so we tend to project our fantasies onto cultures that just don't seem to have made the same mistakes we do. You know, it's a bit like when some poor schmuck in an office who watches that movie Point Break, you know that one? Thinks, I'd like to be a surfer, but it's just too late to do anything about it. But I don't want to bore you with all this philosophizing. I know you're probably getting a little suspicious at this point. Thinking, okay, Doug, if you're saying that everything is relative and nothing can be known with any certainty, then how can some schmendrick like you come here from New York and tell us what life is like in the Amazon jungle? What right do you have? You know, you might be right, I might be totally wrong, I'm not sure. Because when you think about it, there's a long tradition of misrepresenting Indian cultures in the West, and I may just be doing one more in that legacy. In fact, the carnival barker Max Cass exhibited a pair of microcephalic kids from Honduras in the early part of the 20th century. And he billed them as the lost children of the Aztec Empire in a famous freak show. He's shown here at the Cells Floto Circus in, I think it was 1914, Kansas City. And this appeal to the exoticist sensibilities of Americans was a huge success. It's interesting to note that the Aztec is wearing a swastika. I didn't realize a swastika is an Aztec symbol, apparently so. The famous P.T. Barnum had his own pair of phony Aztecs called Maximo and Bartolo, and he billed them as the last remaining members of that ancient empire. And he too made a fortune. So maybe it's simply impossible to look at another culture except through a prism of misunderstanding and exoticism. I don't know the answer. But you know, speaking of freak shows, there were some great freak show acts in the old days. Pinheads were very, very popular. I don't know why, microcephalics. There was one called Schlitzie who was such a big star, he starred in like 5 different movies. You had Crow, the Laotian girl suffering from hypertrichosia, who was billed by Ringling Brothers as the missing Darwinian link between man and his primordial ancestors. There was Jonathan Gibbons, the 3-legged man, Grady Stiles, the lobster boy, Ray Ray, the crawfish boy, and let's not forget CeeLo, the guy with all the kids. My favorite, though, was this one, the Wild Man of Borneo. It turns out he was actually born in the Bronx in New York. But you know, whether I'm right or wrong about anything is basically irrelevant. I mean, what really is important, though, is that as a society, we better get our act together, because we're simply running out of time. I mean, unlike the Amazonians, we seem completely maladapted on an evolutionary level to life here on Earth. And you know, we've managed to overcome scarcity. We've reached a level of technological advancement unprecedented in human history. But we don't seem to know what to do with it. I mean, our response to living with all this bounty is just to stuff ourselves with junk food. And since most people are going to die from complications like diabetes or heart attacks related to being overweight, in a very real way, we're simply eating ourselves to death as a species. When you add to that all the substance abuse, clinical depression, the failure of education, pollution, global warming, the financial crisis, the world's running out of resources, and then all these terrorists running around, it's not a pretty picture. You know, maybe there really is no tomorrow, so we might as well stuff ourselves full of junk food. I just hope that when the polar ice caps finally melt and the seas rise and engulf us all, that maybe some of these fat people will survive by floating up to the top. Because if not, we're simply doomed to extinction. But who knows, maybe it's a Darwinian thing. We're just proving that we're not capable of surviving as a species and we're simply going to die out. And it's not because of any superior predators like dinosaurs or anything like that, or some unavoidable physical catastrophe like an asteroid smashing into the world. It's just because we're lazy, greedy, and undisciplined. But the sad thing is that we're going to drag everyone else down with us. These poor folks from the Amazon, they have nothing to do with it. They just want to be left the hell alone to raise their kids in peace. But I've probably been droning on long enough. In fact, Pim told me that they've rented out this place for a wedding after me, so I better tie things up. I'd like to just thank you all for coming out tonight. You've been a great audience, and hope you've enjoyed the presentation. And if you have, then we here at IMPAKT in particular would like to ask for your help. I mean, due to funding cuts throughout the arts sector here in the Netherlands and basically Europe-wide, it's becoming increasingly difficult for organizations like IMPAKT to bring quality arts programs to audiences like yourselves. More importantly, it's becoming almost impossible to deliver arts outreach projects to kids in some of the toughest schools here in Utrecht, kids who really need it. And that's why we'd like to ask for your help. Any change at all that you guys can spare here today would go a long way towards helping deliver the kinds of programs to the kids who need them the most. So that's why we'd like to ask for your help. Any donations you can do. We're going to send some people around in the audience with hats, so any change you guys can spare, be it a penny, a nickel, that would really go a long way towards helping us out. So please, folks, give what you can. I just wanted to show you, by the way, my mom just got some puppies in New York. Aren't those guys adorable? Look at those little rascals, aren't they something? So please, folks, any help you can give. Because I want you to ask yourselves a question, and that is, what's the greatest nation in the world? And ask yourselves, are you a part of it? Is the greatest nation the United States? Certainly not. Is it the Netherlands? Most likely not either. Costa Rica? That's actually a good suggestion, but it's not that either. The greatest nation in the world is donation. So please, folks, do what you can and help us out. We hate to ask, we know things are tough all over, but... Now, you're probably a little suspicious, so just to let you know, any money that's raised here tonight is going to also help two new charities that we're very excited at IMPAKT to be involved with. The first is Project Green Thumb, which is an initiative by the World Bank and the IMF aimed at eradicating global poverty, global hunger, and global warming by the year 2020. And the idea is very simple, based on the concept that it's better to teach a man to fish and feed him for a lifetime than to give a man a fish and feed him for a day. And it's quite a radically simple idea. Basically, the notion is that by injecting poor people in the developing world with chlorophyll, they'll be able to make their own food through the process of photosynthesis, merely by sitting out in the sun. So basically, it's a win-win situation, and let's be honest, they're just sitting around anyway, or they wouldn't be poor in the first place. And secondly, we're raising money for an organization called Tempura House, which is a shelter for lightly battered women in Amsterdam. But in closing, I'd like to share with you the words of the great Taoist sage, Wan Shu Daoren, who realized that all this philosophical speculation isn't worth anything, and at the end of the day, you just have to decide enough is enough. Because the world doesn't care about our hopes and expectations and dreams. Basically, life just kind of carries on regardless of our expectations. The sage said, if people are willing to stop at once, then they finish at once. If you insist on seeking a place of rest, and then even though you've married off all your children, there are no fewer things to do. And even though monkhood is fine, you still haven't understood your heart. The sage said, if you stop now, then stop. If you seek an ending, there is no ending. Thank you.